I've always believed that true friendship is built on trust and loyalty, that friends protect each other, support each other, celebrate each other's happiness. I was wrong, so devastatingly wrong. They say you never really know someone until you see them at their worst. But what about when you see them at their most deceitful, their most manipulative, their most treacherous? I trusted Sarah with everything. My deepest secrets, my most vulnerable moments, my greatest joys. We had been best friends since college, 13 years of friendship. She was my maid of honor, for God's sake. The person who held my hair back when I was sick, who listened to me cry over breakups, who helped me pick out my first apartment. And all the while she was just waiting for the perfect moment to destroy the one thing that had finally made me truly happy. This is the story of how my best friend systematically sabotaged my relationship with the love of my life, and how I methodically dismantled her entire world in return. 6 months ago, I was deliriously happy. After years of dating disasters and heartbreaks, I had finally found David. He was everything I'd ever wanted: kind, intelligent, ambitious but not obsessive, funny in that quiet way that catches you off guard. We met at a charity fundraiser where we both volunteered, and from our first conversation, something just clicked. "You're different," he told me on our third date, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. "Most people just talk about themselves, but you actually listen. You remember details? So do you," I replied, noting how he'd remembered my coffee order from our first date 2 weeks earlier. The relationship progressed quickly but naturally. Within 4 months, we were talking about moving in together. I'd never felt so secure, so certain about anyone before. When I was with David, everything made sense. The world seemed brighter, more hopeful. Sarah had been there through all of it. The excited phone calls after our first few dates, the anxious text messages seeking advice on what to wear, the late-night conversations dissecting his every word and gesture. She seemed genuinely happy for me, offering enthusiastic encouragement and sage advice. "He sounds perfect for you," she'd said. "I can't wait to meet him." And when they did meet, at a dinner party I hosted, they seemed to get along well. David was charming as always, and Sarah was her usual witty, engaging self. If I noticed her watching him a little too closely when she thought I wasn't looking, I dismissed it as curiosity about the man who had captured my heart. The first sign something was off came about 3 months into our relationship. I'd planned a weekend getaway for David's birthday, a surprise trip to a coastal town he'd mentioned wanting to visit. The morning we were supposed to leave, he called, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I got your text," he said without preamble. "What text?" I asked, confused. I hadn't texted him that morning, wanting to call instead to wish him happy birthday properly. "The one saying you needed to cancel our weekend because of work. Look, if you didn't want to go, you could have just said so instead of making up excuses." My blood ran cold. "David, I never sent that text. I'm literally packing the car right now." Silence stretched between us. "It came from your number," he finally said, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Let me see it," I insisted. He sent me a screenshot. There it was, a message from my number, sent at 2 a.m. "Hey, I'm really sorry, but I have to cancel our weekend. Something came up at work that I can't get out of. I should have told you sooner, but I was hoping it would resolve itself. Happy birthday anyway." "David, I swear I didn't send this. I would never cancel our plans, especially not like this." My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Had my phone been hacked? Did I have some sort of sleep texting disorder? To his credit, David believed me, or at least he wanted to. We still went on the trip, though there was an undercurrent of tension that hadn't been there before. A tiny seed of doubt had been planted. When I mentioned the strange incident to Sarah over coffee the following week, her reaction struck me as odd. Instead of expressing concern or offering theories, she seemed almost dismissive. "Technology is weird sometimes," she said with a shrug. "Maybe your phone glitched? Anyway, how was the trip otherwise?" I should have recognized the deflection, but I was too preoccupied with reassuring David that our relationship was solid. The text incident faded into the background as we continued to build our life together. 3 weeks later, David received an anonymous email with screenshots of dating app conversations that appeared to be from me, actively flirting with other men. The profile photo was mine, the username a variation of one I commonly used. The conversations were dated within our relationship timeframe. "Are you seeing other people?" he asked me point blank, sliding his phone across the table during our dinner at home. I stared at the screen in horror, my stomach dropping as I read through messages I had never written to men I had never spoken to. "No. God, no, David." I don't even have dating apps on my phone. You can check? I handed him my phone, unlocked. This isn't me. Someone is pretending to be me. He scrolled through my phone, finding nothing, but his face remained troubled. The conversations are detailed, personal information that not many people would know. The screenshots contained references to my job, my favorite wine, even an inside joke from my college days. Whoever had created this fake profile knew me intimately. I don't understand who would do this, I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. Who would want to hurt us like this? David didn't accuse me outright, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He wanted to believe me, but the evidence was compelling. We went to bed that night with an invisible wall between us, both lying awake staring at the ceiling, separated by inches that felt like miles. The next incident came a month later. David received text messages from an unknown number claiming to have slept with me. The messages contained details about a birthmark on my hip, something few people knew about. When David confronted me, I was devastated, not just by the accusation, but by the realization that someone close to me was systematically trying to destroy my relationship. Who have you told about your birthmark? David asked, his voice carefully neutral. I thought about it. My doctor, my mom, and ... My blood ran cold. Sarah. We went swimming at her parents' lake house last summer. Would Sarah do this? He asked, and I immediately shook my head. No way. She's my best friend. She's been nothing but supportive of us. But as I said those words, a tiny doubt began to form in the back of my mind. Sarah had been single for a long time. She'd had a string of bad relationships and often joked that she was cursed when it came to men. When I started dating David, she'd seemed genuinely happy for me, but there had been moments, brief flashes of something in her eyes when I talked about how happy I was, that I'd dismissed as my imagination. I pushed the thought away. Sarah wouldn't betray me like that. We had too much history, too deep a bond. Determined to find out who was trying to sabotage us, I began keeping careful track of who knew what about my relationship with David, who had access to my phone, who might have motivation to come between us. But the sabotage continued, subtle at first, then increasingly bold. David's car was keyed outside my apartment building. He received anonymous messages suggesting I was only with him for his money, which was ridiculous given that we earned similar salaries. Reservations we made mysteriously got canceled. And throughout it all, Sarah was there, offering sympathy and support that somehow always left me feeling slightly worse. Men can be so insecure, she'd say with a sigh. If David really trusted you, none of this would matter to him. Or, maybe this is a sign. If your relationship can't withstand a little outside pressure, was it really that strong to begin with? Her words planted doubts, made me question not just who was behind the sabotage, but whether my relationship with David was as solid as I thought. But each time I looked at him, each time we managed to reconnect despite the chaos swirling around us, I knew what we had was real. 4 months into our relationship, things came to a head. David received an email containing doctored photos of me with an ex-boyfriend, time-stamped from the previous week. The photos were convincing, professional-level editing that placed me in locations I recognized from recent days, wearing clothes I actually owned. Someone had gone to considerable effort and expense to create these images. David was shaken. I want to believe you, he said, his voice breaking. But it's so much, Emma. So many different things. If it was just one incident, maybe, but it's been months of this. I know, I whispered, feeling my world crumbling around me. I know how it looks. But I'm telling you the truth. I haven't cheated on you. I wouldn't. He nodded, took a deep breath. I think we need some time apart, just to clear our heads. The words hit me like a physical blow. You're breaking up with me? Not breaking up, just space. To think? But I knew what it meant. Whoever was behind this had succeeded in driving a wedge between us. As I watched David walk out of my apartment, I felt something break inside me. Not just my heart, though that was certainly shattered, but my faith in people, in friendship, in trust. I called Sarah immediately, barely able to speak through my tears as I told her what had happened. I'm coming over, she said, her voice full of concern. Don't move. I'll bring wine. She arrived 40 minutes later with 2 bottles of my favorite red and a pint of ice cream. As I poured out the whole story, she listened attentively, making all the right sympathetic noises, offering comfort and righteous anger on my behalf. Who would do something like this? She fumed, refilling my glass. It's sick. I shook my head miserably. I don't know. But they've won. David's gone. He's an idiot if he doesn't realize what he's throwing away, Sarah said firmly. If he can't trust you after everything you've been through together, maybe he's not the one. But there was something in her tone, something in the way she seemed almost satisfied beneath her outrage, that triggered a memory. Sarah, at my dinner party, watching David when she thought no one was looking. Not with curiosity, as I'd assumed at the time, but with something else. Something hungry. "Sarah," I said slowly, my wine glass halfway to my lips. "That night at the dinner party, what did you think of David?" She blinked, seemingly taken aback by the change of subject. "He's great. Smart, successful, obviously crazy about you. Or he was before all this nonsense. But what did you think of him? Personally?" She laughed a little too brightly. "What do you mean?" "He's your boyfriend." "Was," I corrected, watching her carefully. "He was my boyfriend." Something flickered across her face, so quickly I might have missed it if I hadn't been looking for it. Satisfaction, relief, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The mysterious text canceling our weekend away, sent at 2 a.m. when I'd been asleep but Sarah had been at a bar, with access to my unlocked phone when I went to the bathroom. The dating profile with personal details only a close friend would know. The texts about my birthmark that Sarah had seen. The increasingly elaborate methods of sabotage as David and I had continued to weather the storm, methods that would require time, money, and intimate knowledge of our relationship. Sarah. It had been Sarah all along. I felt physically ill, the wine turning to acid in my stomach. This woman sitting across from me, this person I had trusted implicitly for over a decade, had systematically destroyed the best relationship of my life. Had violated my trust in the most fundamental way possible, but even as these realizations crashed over me, I kept my face carefully neutral. A strange calm settled over me, cutting through the fog of alcohol and grief. If I confronted her now, she would deny everything. I had no proof, only suspicions, and Sarah was nothing if not convincing. She'd fooled me for months after all. No, if I wanted the truth, if I wanted justice, I would need to be strategic. Sarah thought she had won. She thought I was broken, vulnerable, completely unaware of her betrayal, and that gave me an advantage. "You're right," I said, forcing a watery smile. "If he doesn't trust me, maybe he's not the one." It just hurts so much. Sarah reached out, squeezing my hand. "I know, honey, but you'll get through this. You always do. And I'm here for you every step of the way." The sincerity in her voice, the genuine seeming compassion in her eyes, was chilling. How many times had she comforted me like this, all while being the source of my pain? How many other aspects of my life had she subtly manipulated? "Thanks," I murmured. "I don't know what I'd do without you." As she smiled, pleased with herself and secure in her deception, something crystallized within me. The grief and shock transmuted into something harder, colder. Determination, rage. A single-minded focus that cut through the emotional chaos. Sarah had methodically dismantled my happiness, and I would do the same to her. The next morning, I awoke with a pounding headache and a crystal-clear purpose. Sarah's betrayal had broken something fundamental in our friendship, but it had also awakened something in me, a capacity for calculated patience that I hadn't known I possessed. My first instinct had been confrontation, to call her out on her lies and manipulation, but that would accomplish nothing except to alert her that I was on to her. No, I needed evidence, irrefutable proof that she had been behind the sabotage of my relationship. And then, once I had that proof, I needed to understand why. What had driven my best friend of 13 years to turn on me so completely? I started with reconnaissance. While Sarah thought I was wallowing in post-breakup misery, a role I played convincingly during our texts and calls, I was actually conducting a meticulous investigation. First, I recovered deleted text messages from my phone's cloud backup, searching for anything sent during times when I knew I hadn't been using my phone. Sure enough, there was the mysterious birthday weekend cancellation text sent at 2:13 a.m. when my phone's location data showed it had been at the Anchor Bar, where Sarah and I had been drinking that night. I scrolled through my photos, looking at pictures from the nights when Sarah had been with me, and found several where my phone was visible on the table or bar while I was clearly elsewhere, dancing, at the bathroom, ordering drinks. Opportunities where she could have accessed it. But this was still circumstantial. I needed more. I created a trap. Calling Sarah, I tearfully told her I was considering reaching out to David, trying to convince him one last time that I hadn't betrayed him. "I don't think that's a good idea," she counseled, her voice carefully modulated to sound concerned rather than alarmed. He made it clear he needs space. You'll seem desperate if you keep pushing. I know, but I love him, Sarah. I can't just give up without a fight. Trust me on this one. Give him time to miss you. If he reaches out, that's different, but you need to protect your dignity. It was exactly the response I expected. She didn't want me contacting David because it might undo all her hard work, but now I had planted the seed. Sarah would be worried that I might ignore her advice, might reach out to David anyway. She would want to prevent that. Sure enough, David called me the next day, his voice cold. I thought we agreed to give each other space, he said without preamble. We did, I replied, confused. I haven't contacted you. Then what's this email about wanting to meet up to explain everything? Emma, if you can't respect my boundaries— David, I didn't send you an email. Can you forward it to me? There was a pause, then my phone dinged with the forwarded message. It was from my email address, sent the previous night, asking David to meet me at our favorite coffee shop to talk things through. This isn't from me, I said quietly. Someone is impersonating me. Again. I could hear his frustrated sigh. Emma, check the IP address, I interrupted. The email will have originated from a different IP than my usual location. You know how to do that, right? You work in IT. Another pause, longer this time. Then, you're right. The IP doesn't match your usual location. His voice had changed, confusion replacing anger. It's from a different part of the city. Where? I asked, though I already suspected. East Side, near the university, where Sarah lived. David, I said carefully. I think I know who's been doing this. Who's been trying to sabotage us. But I need time to gather proof. Can you give me that? Can you just not react to any more communications that seem to be from me unless you've verbally confirmed with me that they're genuine? The silence stretched out so long I thought he might have hung up. Then cautiously, you have a theory? Yes. And if I'm right, it's someone who's had access to my phone, my personal information, and details about our relationship. Someone I trusted completely. Sarah, he said, not a question but a realization. I closed my eyes, both relieved and devastated that he had come to the same conclusion. You suspected? Not at first. But there were things. The way she looked at me when you weren't watching. How she always seemed to be around when these incidents happened. It seemed too coincidental. Hope fluttered in my chest. So you believe me? That I never cheated, never created those dating profiles? I want to, he said, and I could hear the conflict in his voice. It makes more sense than believing you would sabotage something that was making you so happy. But Emma, I need proof. Concrete evidence. I'm working on it, I promised. Just don't shut me out completely. Give me a chance to show you the truth. Okay, he said finally. But be careful. If Sarah is behind this, if she's been manipulating both of us all this time, who knows what she's capable of? I hung up feeling both vindicated and terrified. David wasn't entirely lost to me. There was still a chance for us. But I had also confirmed that Sarah, my closest friend, had deliberately tried to destroy my happiness. And now I needed to understand why. The opportunity came 2 days later, when Sarah suggested a girls' night at her apartment. Just what you need to get your mind off everything, she insisted. I agreed, but with a hidden agenda. While Sarah thought I would be drinking wine and watching sappy movies, I planned to search for evidence of her betrayal. I arrived at her place armed with 2 bottles of wine and a secret weapon, a small recording device hidden in my purse. Illegal? Possibly. But I was well past caring about such technicalities. You look better, Sarah commented as she poured our first glasses. Less devastated. I shrugged, adopting an air of fragile bravado. I'm trying. No point falling apart over someone who didn't trust me. Exactly. Sarah clinked her glass against mine. His loss. Seriously, Em, I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you're better off. David wasn't right for you anyway. I took a sip of wine to hide my reaction. You think so? You seemed to like him when you met. Oh, he's fine. Charming, successful, all that. But there was something, I don't know, controlling? The way he always checked in with you, wanted to know where you were. It felt a little possessive to me. I stared at her, genuinely baffled by this complete fabrication. David had been the opposite of controlling. If anything, I had been the one who texted more, checked in more frequently. Plus, Sarah continued, warming to her theme, he never really got your sense of humor. Remember at the dinner party when you made that joke about your boss and he just looked confused? Another lie. David had laughed harder than anyone that night, even building on my joke with one of his own. I guess I said noncommittally. It's just hard to let go when I thought he was the one. Sarah's expression softened into sympathy, but there was something else beneath it. Satisfaction. The right person is still out there for you. Someone who will appreciate you the way you deserve. As the evening progressed and the wine flowed, I carefully maintained the appearance of gradual intoxication, while Sarah, unsuspecting, actually became progressively drunker. It was during her third glass that I made my move. "I need to use the bathroom," I announced, deliberately slurring my words slightly. "You know where it is?" Sarah waved vaguely toward the hallway. In the bathroom, I quickly splashed water on my face to keep myself sharp, then set my plan in motion. Instead of returning directly to the living room, I took a detour through Sarah's bedroom, moving quickly and quietly. Her laptop sat on her desk, closed but not powered off. The small light at the edge still glowed. I opened it, praying she hadn't logged out. She hadn't. The screen illuminated to show her desktop, cluttered with files and folders. I didn't have much time. A bathroom break could only last so long before becoming suspicious. I plugged in a USB drive and started copying folders that looked promising. Her documents, photos, and downloads from the past 6 months. It was a fishing expedition, but I didn't have time to be selective. As the files copied, I quickly searched her room for anything else that might help me understand her betrayal. Her bedside drawer contained the usual items: hand cream, reading glasses, a half-finished novel, but underneath these innocent objects lay a small, worn journal. I hesitated only briefly before grabbing it. The file transfer completed, and I pocketed both the USB and the journal, flushed the toilet for appearance's sake, and returned to the living room. "You took forever," Sarah commented, pouring herself another glass. "Sorry, I wasn't feeling great. Too much wine too fast." I settled back onto the couch, heart pounding but expression neutral. Maybe we should order some food to soak it up. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced laughter and painful small talk. Every smile from Sarah, every sympathetic touch or concerned question about how I was really doing, felt like a knife twisting in my gut. This woman, who had been my closest confidant for over a decade, was a complete stranger to me now. A liar, a manipulator, an enemy disguised as a friend. When I finally left Sarah's apartment shortly before midnight, the journal and USB drive burning a hole in my purse, I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to a 24-hour cafe several miles away, ordered a large black coffee, and set up my laptop at a corner table. What I found in Sarah's digital files and personal journal would change everything. The USB drive contained a goldmine of evidence. A folder labeled innocuously Project D contained screenshots of the fake dating profile she had created in my name, drafts of the emails she had sent to David, and even the original versions of the photoshopped images of me with my ex. But it was the journal that truly revealed the depths of Sarah's betrayal and the twisted logic behind it. Page after page documented her growing obsession with David and her resentment of me. "Saw Emma with David today?" One entry read, "She doesn't deserve him. She doesn't even appreciate how perfect he is. All she talked about was some stupid problem at work, while this amazing man sat there listening to her like she was saying something important. It should be me. It's always been supposed to be me finding happiness first." Another entry, dated a few weeks later, "Started the plan today. Just a small thing to plant some doubt. Emma's so trusting, leaves her phone lying around constantly. Doesn't even have a passcode. It's like she's asking for this to happen. If she were a real friend, she would have introduced me to David before starting to date him herself. She knew I was looking for someone. She's always been selfish." And the most chilling entry, from just after David and I had separated, "It worked. They're done." Emma was crying on the phone, so dramatic as usual, making everything about her pain. She has no idea what real pain is like. Watching everyone else find love while you're alone. Being the supportive friend, always. Never the one being supported. "Well, my turn is coming. I'll give it a month, then reach out to David. Comfort him. Show him what he's been missing with Emma. He'll realize I'm the one he should have been with all along." I felt physically ill reading these words, written in the familiar looping handwriting of my oldest friend. The depth of her resentment, the calculated nature of her betrayal, the complete lack of remorse. It was staggering, but mixed with my disgust was a strange sense of clarity. Finally, the pieces fit together. The mystery was solved, and with that knowledge came power. I had what I needed now. Irrefutable evidence that Sarah had methodically sabotaged my relationship with David. I could take this to him. show him the truth, potentially even salvage what we had lost. But as I sat in that quiet cafe, the early morning hours ticking by, I realized that simply exposing Sarah's actions to David wasn't enough. It wouldn't undo the damage she had caused. It wouldn't heal the weeks of pain and doubt. And it certainly wouldn't address the deeper question that now haunted me. How well did I really know Sarah? What other aspects of our friendship had been based on lies and manipulation? If she could so callously destroy my happiness over a man she coveted, what else had she done over our 13 years of friendship? What other betrayals lay buried in our shared history? The more I thought about it, the more certain I became that this incident with David wasn't isolated. Sarah's journal revealed a pattern of resentment and entitlement that must have manifested in other ways over the years. And so, as dawn broke over the city, I made a decision. I would not just expose Sarah's sabotage of my relationship. I would uncover every lie, every manipulation, every betrayal she had ever perpetrated against me. And then, when I had the full picture of who she really was, I would make sure she faced the consequences of her actions. Not just for my sake, but for anyone else she might hurt in the future. I began by methodically going through Sarah's digital files, organizing the evidence of her campaign against my relationship with David. The fake dating profiles, the doctored photos, the spoofed emails and texts, all of it painted a picture of obsessive dedication to destroying what David and I had built together. But there were other files that caught my attention, emails and messages with mutual friends where Sarah subtly undermined me, planting seeds of doubt about my character, my reliability, my honesty. Comments that, viewed individually, might seem like harmless venting or mild criticism, but collectively formed a pattern of systematic character assassination. Emma's great, but she can be so self-centered sometimes. Did you notice how she turned the conversation back to herself when you were talking about your promotion? Between us, I'm a little worried about Emma. I think she might be developing a drinking problem. Have you noticed how she always needs a glass of wine to get through social events? Emma mentioned she's been seeing your ex. She swore me to secrecy, but I thought you should know. I hate being put in this position. Little poisoned darts, strategically fired to isolate me, to ensure that if conflicts arose between us, others would be predisposed to take her side. To make sure I remained dependent on her friendship, because others might view me with subtle suspicion. I found evidence of job opportunities she had forgotten, to mention to me, introductions to potentially important contacts she had promised to make but never did, subtle ways she had limited my growth to keep me in her shadow. And then there was her relationship with Jason, her husband of 3 years. Sarah had always presented their marriage as stable and loving, if somewhat routine. But her journal and private emails told a different story. Jay still has no idea about Michael. One journal entry read, "Sometimes I think he suspects, but he's too trusting. Too desperate to believe everything's fine. It's almost disappointing how easily he's fooled." Michael. The name appeared frequently in her journal, a colleague at the architectural firm where Sarah worked as an interior designer. According to her private writings, they had been having an affair for over a year, meeting in hotel rooms, at his apartment when his roommate was away, occasionally even in Sarah's office after hours. "M says he loves me," she wrote. "Wants me to leave Jay? But that would be messy. Divorce, splitting assets, everyone taking sides. Easier this way. Best of both worlds. Jay provides stability, M provides excitement. What's wrong with wanting it all?" I stared at the words, a cold fury building inside me. Jason was a good man, quiet, thoughtful, devoted to Sarah. He had always been kind to me, always made an effort to maintain a friendship independent of my relationship with his wife. The thought of him being deceived so thoroughly, being made a fool of while Sarah carried on her affair, filled me with a protective rage on his behalf. By the time the cafe began to fill with morning commuters, I had compiled a comprehensive dossier on Sarah's duplicity, not just toward me, but toward many people in her life. I had evidence of her affair, her financial dishonesty. Apparently, she had been hiding significant debt from Jason, and the systematic way she had poisoned my relationships while presenting herself as my most loyal supporter. What I didn't yet have was a plan for how to use this information. Simple exposure seemed inadequate given the scale and duration of her betrayal. A quick confrontation, a dramatic revelation, these might provide momentary satisfaction, but they wouldn't address the deeper harm she had caused. No, what Sarah's actions called for was something more considered, more comprehensive, A response that would ensure she fully understood the consequences of manipulating and hurting the people who trusted her. I wanted her to experience exactly what she had put me through, the slow dawning horror of realizing someone you trusted implicitly had betrayed you completely. The gradual unraveling of confidence, of security, of self-worth. I closed my laptop, gathered my evidence, and left the cafe with new purpose. The exhaustion of a sleepless night had been replaced by crystal-clear determination. Sarah had meticulously dismantled my happiness piece by piece, taking satisfaction in my pain, confident in her own immunity from consequences. I would return the favor, with interest. My revenge plan crystallized over the next week as I gathered additional information and reflected on the most effective approach. I decided against a direct confrontation that would only give Sarah the opportunity to lie, to manipulate the narrative, to turn others against me before I could reveal the truth. No, this required subtlety, patience, and above all, strategy. I began by securing my relationship with David. I invited him to coffee, neutral territory, and laid out everything I had discovered about Sarah's campaign against us. The fake dating profiles, the doctored photos, the journal entries detailing her obsession with him and her resentment of me. I knew something wasn't right, he said, his face pale as he reviewed the evidence. But the scale of it, the calculation, I never imagined anyone could be this deliberately cruel. She's not who I thought she was, I said simply. Not who either of us thought she was. What are you going to do? He asked. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. I'm going to make sure she can't do this to anyone else. Beyond that, I'm still working out the details. David studied my face, clearly wrestling with his thoughts. Just be careful. Not for her sake, but for yours. Don't let her drag you down to her level. I appreciated his concern, but he didn't fully understand. This wasn't about descending to Sarah's level. It was about justice. Measured, proportional, and ultimately necessary. Not just for my sake, but for everyone Sarah had manipulated and would continue to manipulate if left unchecked. I'll be careful, I promised. And I'm not asking you to be part of this. In fact, it's probably better if you stay clear of it entirely. I'm already involved, he pointed out. She used me as a weapon against you. I deserve some closure too. We agreed to rebuild our relationship slowly, to give ourselves time to heal from the damage Sarah had inflicted. The trust between us had been wounded, not destroyed, and with patience and transparency, I believed we could recover what we had lost, perhaps even build something stronger. With that foundation secure, I turned my attention to implementing the first phase of my plan, reconnaissance and relationship building with Jason, Sarah's husband. Jason worked as a financial analyst at a consulting firm downtown, usually taking lunch at a small deli near his office. It wasn't difficult to accidentally run into him there. Emma! Hey, it's good to see you. He greeted me warmly when I approached his table, sandwich in hand. Mind if I join you? Place is packed today. Please. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. How have you been? Sarah mentioned you and David split up. I'm really sorry to hear that. Of course she had mentioned it, probably relished sharing the news. Thanks. It's been tough, but we're actually trying to work things out now. Turns out there were some misunderstandings. That's great, Jason said, and his genuine happiness for me only strengthened my resolve. Sarah will be thrilled. She's been worried about you. I forced a smile. She's always looking out for me. How are things with you two? A flicker of something, uncertainty perhaps, or resignation, crossed his face before he smiled. Good, busy. Work's been intense for both of us. Sarah's firm is pitching for that new downtown development, so she's been putting in late nights. I knew exactly how she'd been spending at least some of those hours, but merely nodded sympathetically. The architecture business sounds demanding. All those site visits, client meetings, design revisions. Exactly. Sometimes I feel like we're just ships passing in the night, you know? But that's modern marriage, I guess. Gotta support each other's careers. Absolutely, I agreed. And Sarah's always been ambitious. I admire how dedicated she is. Our conversation continued, and I carefully steered it toward topics that would help me understand their marriage better, their future plans, their communication patterns, Jason's relationships with their mutual friends. Each piece of information was a potential tool, a possible avenue for exposing Sarah's betrayal in a way that would be both incontrovertible and devastating. By the end of lunch, we had made plans to get together again soon. We should do a double date once you and David are back on solid ground. Jason suggested, and I enthusiastically agreed, knowing such an event would never actually materialize. Over the next 2 weeks, I expanded my intelligence gathering. I befriended a receptionist at Sarah's architectural firm, presenting myself as a potential client researching firms for a major renovation project. Through casual conversation, I learned about office dynamics, confirmed the existence of Michael, a project manager with a reputation for flirting with female colleagues, and gathered details about Sarah's work habits and schedule. I also reached out to mutual friends, carefully feeling out who might have been affected by Sarah's manipulations, who might be potential allies in my quest for justice. I discovered that I wasn't the only one who had experienced Sarah's subtle undermining. Several friends shared stories of missed opportunities, miscommunications, and manipulated perceptions that, in retrospect, had Sarah's fingerprints all over them. I always thought it was weird how she told me you couldn't make it to my gallery opening, when I never even heard from you directly, my friend Mia confided. She made it sound like you had something better to do, but that didn't seem like you. And remember when she told everyone you were thinking of moving to Chicago for that job? Another friend, Tyler, asked. You seemed genuinely confused when we brought it up at Jessica's birthday party. Piece by piece, I assembled a comprehensive picture of Sarah's web of manipulations and lies. The Sarah I had known, or thought I had known, was a carefully constructed facade, hiding a person who systematically controlled and manipulated those around her for her own benefit and amusement. By the time 3 weeks had passed since my discovery of Sarah's betrayal, I had gathered all the evidence I needed and formulated my plan. It would unfold in stages, each designed to dismantle an aspect of Sarah's carefully constructed life, culminating in a final revelation that would leave her as exposed and vulnerable as she had left me. My strategy wasn't about petty revenge. It wasn't about matching pain for pain. It was about justice, ensuring that Sarah's true nature was revealed to those who needed to know, that her capacity to harm others was curtailed, and that she experienced, perhaps for the first time, genuine accountability for her actions. Phase 1 would target her professional reputation and her affair with Michael. Phase 2 would focus on her social circle, exposing the manipulations that had allowed her to maintain her position as the trusted confidant, the reliable friend, the innocent party in any conflict. And Phase 3, the most delicate and important phase, would address her marriage to Jason, ensuring he had all the information he needed to make informed decisions about his future. Each phase would build on the others, creating a cascade of revelations that would leave no aspect of her life untouched by the truth. By the end, Sarah would stand fully exposed, not as the victim she would inevitably claim to be, but as the architect of her own downfall. I had no illusions about the gravity of what I was undertaking. This wasn't an impulsive act of vengeance, but a deliberate process of correction, of balancing scales that had been unfairly weighted for far too long. It would require patience, precision, and an unwavering commitment to truth above all else. The night before I implemented Phase 1, I sat alone in my apartment, reviewing my evidence and strategy one final time. A small voice in the back of my mind questioned whether I was going too far, whether this methodical dismantling of another person's life could be justified, even given the harm she had caused. But then I remembered the cold calculation in Sarah's journal entries, the satisfaction she had taken in my pain, the casual cruelty with which she had betrayed not just me, but many others who had trusted her. And I knew that what I was doing wasn't excessive. It was necessary. Sarah had spent years constructing an elaborate house of cards, built on deception and manipulation. All I was going to do was introduce a little honesty into the equation, and watch it all come tumbling down. Phase 1 began on a Monday morning, with a carefully crafted email sent from an anonymous account to the partners of Sarah's architectural firm. The email was professionally worded, concerned in tone, and included select evidence of Sarah's affair with Michael. Nothing sexually explicit, but text exchanges and emails that clearly documented an inappropriate relationship between colleagues. As a long-term client of your respected firm, the email read, "I feel obligated to bring this situation to your attention. While I have the highest regard for your company's professional standards, I recently became aware of conduct that may not align with those standards. I provide this information not to cause personal or professional hardship, but out of concern for the firm's reputation and the potential for conflicts of interest in project management." Attached were screenshots showing Sarah and Michael discussing meeting in the office after hours, for purposes clearly unrelated to work, communications where they discussed hiding their relationship from colleagues, and evidence that Michael had assigned Sarah to his projects over more qualified team members. I had no desire to get Michael fired. He was a secondary player in this drama, manipulated by Sarah in his own way. But their affair violated company policies about disclosure of relationships between team members, especially where project assignments were concerned. At minimum, it would trigger an HR investigation and put both of them under uncomfortable scrutiny. The second part of Phase 1 launched simultaneously, another anonymous email, this one to Michael directly, with Sarah CC'd. Michael and Sarah? It began, "I believe it's time for transparency. Attached, you'll find evidence of your relationship that has been shared with the firm's partners and HR department. Additionally, Michael should be aware that Sarah has been sharing details of your intimate relationship with multiple friends, including unflattering comparisons to her husband's performance. Sarah, for your information, Michael has been pursuing a relationship with Jessica in accounting since July, while telling you that you're the only one. You both might want to consider whether secrets and lies are a stable foundation for either professional advancement or personal happiness." Attached were screenshots of Sarah's journal entries about Michael, sexually explicit text messages she had sent him, and, the coup de grace, messages from Michael to Jessica that I had discovered during my investigation, clearly showing he was playing the same game with multiple women. With these two emails, I had effectively detonated a bomb in the center of Sarah's professional life and her affair. The firm would be obligated to investigate, potentially resulting in disciplinary action. Michael, confronted with evidence that Sarah had been discussing intimate details of their relationship, would likely pull away from her. And Sarah, discovering Michael's infidelity within their infidelity, would experience her first taste of betrayal. But this was just the beginning. I monitored the fallout from a safe distance, through contacts at the firm and mutual friends. By mid-afternoon, rumors were swirling about an HR emergency meeting. By evening, both Sarah and Michael had been called into separate discussions with management. And by the next morning, Michael was publicly giving Sarah the cold shoulder, clearly having received the email about her indiscretions. Sarah attempted to call me that evening, undoubtedly seeking a sympathetic ear for her professional troubles. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her message, the familiar voice strained with stress but still maintaining the pretense of the caring friend. "Emma, hey, it's me. God, I've had the worst day. Office politics stuff, I could really use a friend right now. Call me back when you can? Love you. Love you." The casual endearment from the woman who had systematically destroyed my happiness made me physically nauseous. I deleted the message without responding. Phase 2 kicked off on Thursday, 3 days after the initial emails. This phase targeted Sarah's social standing, the carefully cultivated image she had built as the reliable friend, the trusted confidant, the person everyone turned to in a crisis. I created a private digital document, not publicly accessible but shared individually with 25 people in our extended social circle. The document was titled simply Patterns of Behavior and contained carefully selected evidence of Sarah's manipulations over the years. Text messages where she spread malicious rumors about one friend to another. Emails where she claimed to have extended invitations that were never actually sent. Journal entries where she gloated about creating conflict between mutual friends. Evidence of her systematically isolating people she felt threatened by, including me. I didn't editorialize or offer my own interpretation. I simply presented the evidence, organized chronologically, with a brief introduction. The following information has come to light recently and is being shared with those directly affected. Each person receiving this document appears in some capacity in the evidence presented. This is not being shared publicly out of respect for the privacy of everyone involved, including Sarah. Recipients are asked to review this information and draw their own conclusions. All claims are supported by the attached evidence. I sent the document link to each person individually, with a personalized note highlighting the sections most relevant to them. To Mia, I pointed out the evidence that Sarah had deliberately excluded her from social events, while claiming Mia had declined the invitations. To Tyler, I highlighted Sarah's messages to his ex-girlfriend, encouraging her to break up with him while simultaneously telling Tyler she was supporting their relationship. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone blew up with messages expressing shock, hurt, anger, and validation of long-held suspicions. Several people reached out to compare notes, to share additional instances of Sarah's manipulations that I hadn't been aware of. The friend group's reaction rippled outward as people contacted others who hadn't received the original document, sharing their own experiences and warnings. By Friday evening, Sarah's carefully cultivated social network was in tatters, with most people either openly avoiding her or watching her with new, suspicious eyes. Sarah's increasingly frantic attempts to reach me continued. Calls, texts, even an appearance at my apartment door which I avoided by simply not answering. She clearly suspected I might be involved but had no proof, and her messages fluctuated between concern, "Are you okay? I'm worried about you," and thinly veiled accusations. "People are saying crazy things and I think someone might be impersonating me. Has anyone sent you anything strange?" Phase 3, the final and most consequential phase, I scheduled for Saturday evening. This phase focused on Jason, Sarah's husband, the man who had built his life around a fundamentally fraudulent relationship. I arranged to meet him at a quiet bar downtown, telling him I needed his advice about my reconciliation with David. He arrived prompt as always, greeting me with a warm but tired smile. "Thanks for meeting me," I said as we settled into a corner booth with drinks. "I know it's last minute." "Not at all. It's good to see you." Jason took a sip of his beer, studying me. "You look different. More centered somehow." I smiled faintly. "I've been through some changes lately. Learned some hard truths. About David? About a lot of things." I met his gaze directly, including Sarah. His expression shifted subtly, a tightening around the eyes, a slight tension in his jaw. "What about Sarah?" "Jason, what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. And if you want to get up and walk out at any point, I'll understand completely. But I think you deserve to know the truth, even if it's painful." He set his glass down carefully. "You're scaring me a little, Emma." "I'm sorry. That's not my intention." I took a deep breath. "Sarah has been having an affair with a colleague named Michael for over a year. She's been hiding significant debt from you. And she deliberately sabotaged my relationship with David because she wanted him for herself." Jason's face went completely blank, a mask of shock that gradually transformed into disbelief. That can't be true. Sarah wouldn't." I slid a folder across the table. "Everything is in here. Bank statements showing secret accounts and credit cards. Text messages between her and Michael. Hotel receipts. Her own journal entries where she discusses the affair and her feelings about your marriage." His hands shook slightly as he opened the folder, scanning the contents with increasing agitation. "This could be fabricated. People can fake text messages, documents. Look at the handwriting in the journal photos," I said gently. "You know what her handwriting looks like." He turned to those pages, and I saw the moment recognition hit him. The distinctive way Sarah looped her G's and crossed her T's. The color drained from his face. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Because you're a good person who deserves honesty. Because Sarah's patterns of deception and manipulation have hurt many people, including you. And because if I were in your position I would want to know, even though it hurts." Jason closed the folder, pushing it back toward me as if he couldn't bear to touch it any longer. "And what about you? What's your role in all this? Revenge?" I considered my answer carefully. "Justice," I said finally. "Consequences for actions. Transparency where there has been deception. I'm not trying to tell you what to do with this information, Jason. That's entirely your decision. Stay with her, leave her, confront her, don't confront her. Those choices belong to you alone. I just believe you should make those choices with all the facts available to you." He nodded slowly, his eyes unfocused as he processed everything. "I've suspected something. Not this specific, not this extensive, but things haven't felt right for a while. Communications that didn't add up. Late nights that seemed excessive even for big projects. Money that seemed to disappear with vague explanations. I'm truly sorry," I said and meant it. Nobody deserves this kind of betrayal. Jason looked at me directly then, his expression a complex mixture of pain, gratitude, and recognition. "Including you. What she did to you and David, that's unforgivable." "It was calculated," I acknowledged, "and it worked for a while. But David and I are rebuilding now. We'll be okay eventually." "And Sarah? What happens to her now?" "That depends partly on you, and partly on her, whether she takes responsibility for her actions or continues to deny and manipulate." But she's facing consequences at work for the undisclosed relationship with Michael, and many of our mutual friends have distanced themselves after learning about her pattern of deception. Jason nodded slowly, then stood up. I need time to think. To process all this, of course. I handed him my card with my personal number written on the back. If you need to talk or if you have questions about anything in that folder, call me, day or night. He took the card, staring at it for a long moment. Thank you for telling me. It's devastating, but necessary. After Jason left, I sat alone finishing my drink, feeling strangely hollow. The implementation of my plan was complete. All 3 phases had been executed with precision, and the results were unfolding exactly as I had anticipated. Sarah's carefully constructed world of deception was collapsing around her, leaving her to face the consequences of her own actions. Yet there was no satisfaction in it, no triumph or vindication, only a somber recognition of wasted friendship, wasted trust, wasted years, and a quiet determination that the truth, however painful, was preferable to comforting lies. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Sarah, again. This time I answered. Emma? Her voice was frantic, tearful. Finally! Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for days. I know. Everything's falling apart. There are crazy rumors at work. Friends are avoiding me, and now Jason's acting strange. I think someone's trying to sabotage my life, and I don't understand why. I need you, Emma. You're the only one I can trust right now. The irony was almost too much to bear. Am I? A pause. What does that mean? It means I know, Sarah. About everything? The fake dating profiles you created in my name. The doctored photos you sent to David. The texts and emails you spoofed from my accounts. Your affair with Michael. The way you've manipulated our friends for years. I know all of it. Silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of exposed deception. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed completely, harder, defensive. You can't prove any of that. I already have. To David. To your firm's partners. To our friends. To Jason. The evidence is quite compelling, especially your own journal, which you really should have kept in a more secure location than your bedside drawer. Her gasp was audible. You went through my things? You invaded my privacy? How could you? How could I? I repeated, incredulous despite myself. How could you systematically destroy my relationship with David? How could you betray my trust, manipulate our friends, lie to your husband? You crossed every boundary, violated every principle of friendship and basic decency, and you're outraged that I read your journal? This is illegal. I could press charges. Breaking and entering, theft of personal property. Go ahead, I interrupted calmly. Explain to the police why you created fake dating profiles impersonating me, committed wire fraud by sending emails and texts pretending to be me, and produced fraudulent doctored photographs. I'm sure they'll be very sympathetic. Another silence, this one calculated rather than shocked. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted to a tearful plea. Emma, please. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was jealous and stupid and I made terrible choices. But 13 years of friendship has to count for something. We can work through this. There's nothing to work through, Sarah. You aren't who I thought you were. Maybe you never were. And while I've ensured that the people who needed to know the truth now do, what happens next is entirely up to you. You can continue denying and manipulating, or you can finally take responsibility for your actions and try to become someone better than you've been. That's your choice. Emma, goodbye, Sarah. I ended the call and blocked her number. There was nothing more to say, nothing more to do. The machinery of consequence I had set in motion would continue without further input from me. Sarah would face the results of her own actions, and I would move forward with rebuilding what she had tried to destroy. 2 days later, David and I met for dinner at a small restaurant where we'd had our second date. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us, a return to the beginning, a chance to start fresh with clearer understanding. How are you feeling? He asked as we settled at our table. I considered the question seriously. Lighter. Like I've set down a heavy weight I didn't even realize I was carrying. And Sarah? Have you heard from her? Not since our last call. She's been frozen out at work. Most of our friends have distanced themselves, and Jason moved out of their apartment yesterday. She's experiencing exactly what she put me through, the sudden collapse of her world, except in her case, she actually earned it. David studied me thoughtfully. Do you regret it? Any of it? No, I said without hesitation. I revealed the truth, her truth in her own words from her own records. I didn't fabricate anything or manipulate anyone. I simply made sure that the people she had been deceiving had access to the facts they deserved to know. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you handled it as ethically as possible given the circumstances. That's worth a lot, actually. I reached across the table, taking his hand. I'm sorry for what we lost because of her. The trust, the time. We're here now, he said simply, squeezing my hand. And we know what we're dealing with. No more shadows, no more doubts. We talked long into the evening, disentangling the threads of manipulation Sarah had woven around us, rebuilding our understanding of each other without her toxic influence. It wouldn't be immediate or easy. Trust, once damaged, takes time to fully restore, but we had truth on our side now, and time. As for Sarah, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had taken a leave of absence from her firm, pending an ethics investigation. Jason filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences rather than infidelity, a kindness she didn't deserve but that spoke to his character. Most of our social circle maintained a distance, though a few people, those most susceptible to manipulation, had begun to cautiously reconnect with her. I felt no need to monitor her life or fortunes any further. My purpose had never been to destroy Sarah completely, only to ensure she faced appropriate consequences for her actions and could no longer hurt the people I cared about. What she did with the ruins of the life she had sabotaged was entirely her concern, not mine. 1 month after our confrontation, I received a thick envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was Sarah's journal, the original, not the copies I had made, with a single post-it note attached to the cover. You were right. It read in her familiar handwriting. About everything. I'm getting help. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did and why it was wrong. Goodbye, Emma. I placed the journal on my bookshelf without opening it again. A reminder, perhaps, that people are rarely who we believe them to be, for better or worse. That trust should be given cautiously and withdrawn decisively when violated. That consequences, even delayed ones, eventually find those who deserve them. And most importantly, that the truth, however painful initially, is ultimately the only solid foundation on which to build a life. Sarah had sabotaged my relationship, and I had exposed her secrets and ended her marriage. But the true victory wasn't in the revenge itself. It was in the reclamation of my own narrative, my own heart, my own future, free from the influence of someone who had never had my best interests at heart. Some would call what I did revenge. I prefer to think of it as restoration, of balance, of truth, of justice. And sometimes that's close enough to healing. 6 months after everything happened with Sarah, I found myself in a strange place emotionally. The acute rage had faded, replaced by something more complex, a mixture of lingering hurt, cautious optimism about my rebuilt relationship with David, and occasional flashes of something uncomfortably close to guilt. Not guilt over exposing Sarah's manipulations and lies. I remained convinced that had been necessary justice. But sometimes, in quiet moments, I questioned the methodical thoroughness with which I'd dismantled her life. Had I become, in my pursuit of justice, something too similar to what I despised? These thoughts usually visited in the early morning hours when sleep proved elusive. At 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, I found myself on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the city's scattered lights and contemplating the events of the past year. Can't sleep again? David's voice came from behind me, gentle with understanding. I turned to see him leaning against the doorframe, hair tousled from sleep. 6 months of rebuilding our relationship had brought us to a good place, stronger in many ways than before Sarah's interference. We had moved in together 2 months ago, a step that felt right despite, or perhaps because of, everything we'd overcome. Just thinking, I replied, offering a small smile. He joined me at the railing, our shoulders touching in comfortable companionship. About Sarah? About everything. How different things are now. How much has changed. David nodded, understanding without needing elaboration. I ran into Jason yesterday, he said after a moment. My attention sharpened. How is he? Better than you'd expect. The divorce is almost finalized. He started seeing someone, casually, nothing serious yet. He seems lighter. I nodded, feeling genuine happiness for Jason. He had handled the revelation of Sarah's betrayal with remarkable dignity, never publicly disparaging her even as he quietly extricated himself from their marriage. He deserves happiness. He asked about you, David continued. Wanted to know if you were okay. Said he still appreciates what you did, telling him the truth. I gazed out at the city lights, processing this. And Sarah? Did he mention her? David hesitated. He said she's been trying to reconcile. Calls him regularly, sends emails about how she's changed, how she's in therapy. He's not interested. I wouldn't be either, I murmured. We stood in comfortable silence for several minutes before David spoke again. Have you heard anything from her directly? Not since the journal. I hadn't told David about the note attached to it. Those words had felt strangely private, a final communication not meant for sharing. And I haven't looked her up online or asked about her? Clean break. That's probably best. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. Come back to bed? It's freezing out here. I leaned into his warmth, grateful for his steady presence. In a minute, after he went inside, I took a final moment alone with my thoughts. The truth was, while I had maintained a complete separation from Sarah, I still heard things through mutual acquaintances. I knew she had eventually resigned from her firm rather than face the ethics investigation's conclusion. I knew she had moved to a smaller apartment across town after Jason filed for divorce. I knew she had lost most of our social circle, though a few friends, either more forgiving or more gullible than the rest, had maintained contact. But these were just distant facts, not part of my daily reality. My life had moved forward. David and I were planning a trip to Europe in the spring. I had received a promotion at work. We had adopted a dog, a gentle rescue mutt named Cooper, who had quickly become the center of our shared life. I had everything I'd wanted before Sarah's betrayal, everything I'd fought to reclaim afterward. So why did I still find myself on the balcony at 3 a.m., unable to fully release the past? Perhaps because deep down I suspected it wasn't truly over. The first indication I was right came 2 weeks later, on a rain-soaked Thursday afternoon. I was leaving a client meeting downtown when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Hello? I answered, hurrying toward the parking garage as rain pattered against my umbrella. Emma? It's Mia. Her voice sounded strained, uncomfortable. Mia had been part of our friend group for years, though never particularly close to either Sarah or me. She had received my evidence document during phase 2 of my plan, but had mostly stayed neutral in the aftermath, maintaining minimal contact with both of us. Mia, hi. This is unexpected. How are you? I'm okay. She paused. Look, I'm calling because I don't know if I should get involved, but it doesn't feel right to stay silent. My hand tightened on the umbrella handle. What is it? Sarah reached out to me last week. She wanted to meet for coffee, said she was reconnecting with old friends, making amends for past behavior. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity, to be honest. Okay, I said cautiously. At first, it seemed genuine. She apologized for things she'd done, admitted to manipulating situations. She seemed different, humbled. But then she started asking questions about you and David. A cold weight settled in my stomach. What kind of questions? Where you're living now? Whether you're still together? If you seemed happy. When I wouldn't give her much information, she got frustrated. Then she said something that bothered me. Mia's voice lowered. She said you'd destroyed her life based on lies and out-of-context information, and that she was going to set the record straight. I had reached my car but remained standing beside it, rain beginning to seep through my coat as my umbrella tilted. Did she elaborate on what that meant? No, but her whole demeanor changed when she talked about you. Emma, it was unsettling. The look in her eyes. I don't think she's as healed as she wants people to believe. Thank you for telling me, I said, my mind already racing ahead to implications, possibilities, potential threats. There's more. Mia continued reluctantly. She mentioned she's been talking to someone named Karen? Said this person has been helping her build her case. Karen. The name hit me like a physical blow. Karen Westfield, David's ex-girlfriend from 3 years ago before we met. Their breakup had been acrimonious. She had cheated, then tried to blame him, then harassed him for months afterward. He had eventually had to threaten legal action to get her to stop contacting him. Are you sure she said Karen? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Positive. I remembered because she emphasized it. My friend Karen thinks I have grounds for a defamation suit or something like that. Does that mean something to you? Unfortunately, yes. I thanked Mia again for the warning, ended the call, and immediately dialed David. He answered on the second ring. Hey, everything okay? How was your meeting? The meeting was fine, but we need to talk. Sarah is apparently building a case against me with help from Karen Westfield. His sharp intake of breath confirmed he understood the significance immediately. Karen? How would Sarah even know her? I don't know, but it can't be coincidence. Karen hates you, Sarah hates me. It's an alliance of convenience. I'll be home in an hour. We'll figure this out. I hung up and finally got into my car, sitting motionless behind the wheel as rain drummed on the roof. So much for my clean break. So much for moving forward. Sarah wasn't done, and neither, it seemed, was I. David and I spent that evening discussing what Sarah might be planning and how to prepare. The mention of a defamation suit was concerning, though ultimately we concluded it was likely an empty threat. The evidence I had shared about Sarah had been authentic, documented, and in many cases in her own words from her own devices. Truth is the ultimate defense against defamation. More worrying was the potential for new manipulations or lies, especially with Karen Westfield involved. Karen had proven herself capable of considerable vindictiveness during her breakup with David, going so far as to contact his boss with fabricated complaints and spreading rumors among mutual acquaintances. We should document everything, David suggested as we sat at our kitchen table. Any contact from either of them, anything suspicious, anything that seems targeted. Screenshots, recordings if legal, detailed notes with dates and times. I nodded, the familiar cold focus settling over me. And we should warn people who might be approached. Jason, obviously, but also close friends, colleagues, family members. Not to spread paranoia, David cautioned, but just to let them know they might be contacted and to be careful about what information they share. Over the next few days, we implemented these precautions discreetly. I spoke with Jason, who confirmed Sarah had indeed become more insistent in her reconciliation attempts recently, with a new undercurrent of bitterness when she mentioned me. She keeps saying you manipulated evidence to turn people against her. He told me during a phone call that you had some kind of vendetta and took things out of context. Does she deny the affair with Michael? I asked. No, she admits to that. And to lying about work hours, hiding debt, all of it. But she insists you exaggerated and manipulated the situation to make it seem worse than it was. A classic tactic. Admit to the undeniable while recasting the narrative to minimize culpability. I wasn't surprised, but it was still disappointing. Are you okay? I asked Jason, genuinely concerned. This can't be easy for you, he sighed. I'm managing. The divorce papers should be finalized next week. I just want it over with so I can move on completely. I understand. And I'm sorry you're still dealing with this. Not your fault, he said firmly. You did what a true friend should. Told me the truth when I needed to hear it. Everything since then has been Sarah's choices, not yours. His certainty was reassuring, but as I hung up, I couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Sarah was clearly laying groundwork for something, systematically approaching people in our shared circles, attempting to rewrite the narrative of what had happened. The question was, what was her endgame? I didn't have to wait long to find out. 3 days later, I received an email notification about a new blog post from an account called Truth Behind Lies. The preview text made my blood run cold. How my best friend destroyed my marriage, career, and reputation based on obsession and jealousy. I clicked through to find a slickly designed website featuring Sarah's smiling face above a lengthy post detailing her version of events. In her telling, I was the manipulator, a jealous, unstable woman obsessed with her perfect life, who had fabricated and distorted evidence to punish her for imagined slights. She portrayed herself as the victim of a calculated smear campaign, claiming I had violated her privacy, stolen her personal journals, and maliciously misrepresented innocent situations. Most disturbing was her characterization of my motivation. According to Sarah, I had become infatuated with her husband, Jason, and had orchestrated the entire situation when he rejected my advances. David was barely mentioned, reduced to a peripheral figure in her narrative rather than the central reason for her sabotage. I read the entire post twice, my initial shock giving way to cold analysis. The writing was polished, persuasive, emotionally resonant, clearly professionally edited, possibly even ghostwritten. The site itself was expensively designed, with carefully selected photos showing Sarah looking vulnerable, yet dignified. This wasn't an impulsive retaliation, but a calculated public relations campaign. At the bottom of the post was an announcement of Sarah's forthcoming tell-all memoir, Betrayed: How I Survived Friendship Turned Toxic. With a major independent publisher, pre-orders were already being accepted. I called David immediately. Sarah's gone public. Big public. Website, memoir deal, the works. I'm looking at it now, he replied, and I could hear keyboard clicks in the background. Lisa from accounting just sent me the link. It's comprehensive. And completely fictional, I said, anger finally breaking through my shock. She's painting me as a delusional, obsessed woman who fabricated evidence because I wanted her husband. It's absurd. It's also potentially legally actionable, David pointed out. She's making specific false claims about you that could damage your reputation and career. We should talk to a lawyer. He was right, of course. This wasn't just Sarah venting to friends or trying to salvage her dignity. This was a coordinated public attack designed to rehabilitate her image at the expense of mine, and potentially to make money in the process. I'll call Paula, I decided, referring to a law school friend who now specialized in defamation cases. See what she thinks our options are. As I hung up, my phone pinged with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. How does it feel to be the villain of the story for once? The world deserves to know who you really are. I didn't need to ask who had sent it. Sarah's campaign had officially begun. Paula Santos, my law school friend turned defamation attorney, agreed to meet me for lunch the following day. I forwarded her Sarah's blog post and a summary of our history beforehand, so she came prepared with initial thoughts. First, she said after we ordered, her expression serious, this is absolutely defamatory. She's making specific, demonstrably false claims about you that could harm your reputation and livelihood. You have grounds for legal action. Relief flooded through me. So we can shut down the blog. Stop the book? Paula's grimace tempered my optimism. Not immediately, no. Legal proceedings in cases like this take time. And more importantly, you need to consider the practical implications of pursuing this legally. Meaning defamation suits are lengthy, expensive, emotionally draining, and very public. Everything you presented as evidence against Sarah would become part of the court record, accessible to anyone. Your methods of obtaining that evidence would be scrutinized. And Sarah would likely claim her statements are either opinions, substantially true, or protected speech. I took a sip of water, considering this. So, even though she's clearly lying, it wouldn't be simple to legally stop her. Exactly. Plus, there's the practical reality that suing her would give her narrative more attention and potentially more credibility in some circles. Why sue if there isn't some truth she's trying to suppress? That kind of thing. Frustration coiled through me. So she can just get away with this? Publish blatant lies about me with no consequences? Paula leaned forward. I didn't say that. I'm saying a full-scale legal battle might not be your best first option. There are other approaches, such as a strongly worded cease and desist letter from my firm could be effective, especially with her publisher. They have legal departments that hate controversy. If they believe publishing her book might embroil them in a legitimate defamation case, they might reconsider the contract. I nodded slowly. That makes sense. Also, Paula continued, while you're understandably focused on the personal attacks, there are strategic vulnerabilities in Sarah's narrative. She admits to the affair with Michael, for instance, but claims you distorted its significance. That's an opening. If Michael were willing to clarify the actual nature of their relationship, it would undermine her credibility. Michael barely knows me. Why would he help? Paula shrugged. Self-interest. If Sarah's portraying their relationship inaccurately, he might want to set the record straight for his own reputation. Worth exploring. We spent the remainder of lunch developing a multi-pronged strategy. Paula would prepare legal documents while I would gather counter-evidence and potential statements from people who could refute Sarah's specific claims. As we parted outside the restaurant, Paula squeezed my arm reassuringly. One more thing to consider, the evidence you presented about Sarah originally was compelling precisely because you didn't editorialize or embellish. You let the facts speak for themselves. That same approach might be your best defense now. Her words stayed with me during the drive home. In my effort to expose Sarah's deception, I had been meticulously factual, presenting evidence without manipulation or exaggeration. Perhaps the same strategy could protect me from her counterattack. Rather than engaging in a public mudslinging match or trying to match Sarah's emotional narrative with one of my own, I could simply present the documented facts and let others draw their own conclusions. By the time I reached home, a plan was forming. Not just legal defense, but a carefully calibrated response that would neutralize Sarah's attacks without dragging me further into her drama. David was already there, laptop open on the kitchen table, Cooper lying at his feet. "How did it go with Paula?" he asked, looking up as I entered. I set down my bag and gave him a quick kiss before settling into the chair across from him. Productive. She thinks we have a solid legal case but recommends starting with less aggressive measures. I outlined Paula's suggestions, then added my own thoughts about a fact-based counter-strategy. David listened attentively, then turned his laptop toward me. While you were with Paula, I did some digging on Sarah's publisher and the timing of this memoir deal. Look at this. The screen showed a publishing industry news site with an announcement dated 3 weeks earlier, well before Sarah's blog launch. The brief article mentioned Horizon House Publishing acquiring a timely memoir about friendship betrayal and digital privacy from Sarah Harrison, represented by literary agent Kendra Westfield. Westfield? I repeated, the connection immediately clear. Karen's sister? David nodded grimly. Karen's older sister has been a literary agent in New York for about 10 years. Looks like that's the connection between Karen and Sarah. Karen introduced them, probably after learning about our situation. So this has been in the works for months, I said, the implications sinking in. The blog, the memoir, all of it. It's not just emotional retaliation. It's a calculated professional strategy, with Karen's help orchestrating it from behind the scenes, David confirmed, which explains the polished quality of the blog and the quick publication deal. Karen finally found a way to strike at both of us simultaneously. I leaned back in my chair, processing this new information. Sarah had taken our private conflict and transformed it into a commercial opportunity with Karen Westfield's assistance. The betrayal had evolved from personal to profitable. So what now? David asked, watching me carefully. I took a deep breath, possibilities, scenarios, and strategies flowing through my mind. Now we respond, not reactively or emotionally, but strategically. Sarah wants to control the narrative, to recast herself as the victim and me as the villain. We don't play that game? What game do we play instead? The truth game, I said simply. Exactly as before. We gather facts, documentation, statements from witnesses. We create a comprehensive, verifiable record that contradicts her false narrative, and we make it accessible to anyone who needs to see it. Her publisher, potentially sympathetic media, mutual acquaintances. David nodded slowly. Not a public counterattack, but a focused defense. Exactly. Sarah's counting on emotional engagement, on drawing me into a messy, public she said situation where truth becomes subjective. I won't give her that satisfaction. As I outlined my approach more fully, I felt the same cold, clear focus that had guided me through the original exposure of Sarah's deception. This wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about protection. Protecting the truth, my reputation, and the life David and I were building together. Sarah had weaponized her own humiliation, turning it into a commercial opportunity and a mechanism for retaliation. But in doing so, she had overlooked something fundamental. The same evidence that had exposed her originally still existed. And this time, I wouldn't be operating in secrecy, but in the clear light of justified self-defense. Let her publish her memoir. Let her blog her fictional account. Let her portray herself as the wounded party, the misunderstood friend. The truth would speak for itself. It always did eventually. Over the next 2 weeks, I implemented my counter-strategy with methodical precision. While Paula sent formal letters to Sarah's publisher outlining the legally questionable aspects of her forthcoming memoir, I focused on assembling a comprehensive fact file addressing each of Sarah's specific allegations. For her claim that I had been romantically interested in Jason, I gathered years of text messages showing my consistent encouragement of their relationship, including helping plan their anniversary celebrations and offering relationship advice when they hit rough patches. I also secured a statement from Jason himself, explicitly refuting Sarah's narrative. At no point in our friendship did Emma ever express or demonstrate romantic interest in me. Her decision to share evidence of my wife's infidelity came from a place of genuine concern for my well-being, not personal gain. The suggestion otherwise is not just false, but a transparent attempt to distract from the actual betrayal in question. For Sarah's assertion that I had fabricated or manipulated evidence of her affair with Michael, I reached out directly to Michael himself, a calculated risk that paid off unexpectedly well. Michael, it turned out, had been served with divorce papers by his own wife, who had discovered the affair independently of my revelations. He was in no mood to participate in Sarah's rehabilitation campaign and provided a notarized statement confirming the timeline and nature of their relationship, directly contradicting Sarah's sanitized version. While I deeply regret my participation in an extramarital affair and the hurt it caused multiple people, I cannot allow factual inaccuracies about that relationship to stand unchallenged," his statement read. The affair with Sarah Harrison began in June of last year and continued until March of this year, encompassing approximately 47 intimate encounters at various locations, including my apartment, hotels, and occasionally our workplace after hours. It was not, as characterized in recent public statements, a brief emotional connection or two people seeking comfort during difficult times. For each lie Sarah told in her blog, I assembled contradictory evidence, documentation, witness statements, timeline inconsistencies. I didn't embellish or interpret. I simply presented facts with supporting evidence. Parallel to this effort, David worked his professional contacts to trace the connections between Karen Westfield and Sarah's sudden publishing opportunity. He discovered that Karen had first approached her sister about Sarah's story, within days of our reconciliation becoming known to mutual acquaintances, suggesting the retaliatory plan had been initiated almost immediately after Sarah realized she had lost her campaign to separate us permanently. By the end of the 2 weeks, we had compiled a comprehensive counter-dossier addressing every significant claim in Sarah's blog and anticipated memoir. Paula reviewed it for legal soundness, then prepared specialized versions for different audiences, one for Sarah's publisher highlighting legal vulnerabilities, one for mutual friends clarifying factual distortions, and a more detailed version for our own records. Throughout this process, I maintained public silence about Sarah's accusations. When friends called asking about the blog, I simply said I was addressing the falsehoods through appropriate channels and preferred not to engage in public debate about private matters. This measured response confused some who had expected outrage, but it also projected confidence, the quiet certainty of someone with nothing to hide and no need for defensive explanations. Sarah, meanwhile, escalated her campaign. She gave interviews to several mid-tier magazines and podcasts, expanding on her victim narrative and hinting at even more dramatic revelations in her forthcoming memoir. She created social media accounts dedicated to surviving toxic friendship and began building a following among people with similar experiences, people who, not knowing the actual facts, sympathized with her portrayal of betrayal and vindictive exposure. Her publicity push culminated in an appearance on The Mina Reynolds Show, a nationally syndicated talk program known for emotional interview segments. Sarah arrived styled for maximum sympathy, subtle makeup emphasizing her vulnerability, simple clothing projecting authenticity, body language carefully calibrated to convey emotional woundedness. David and I watched the interview together, my hand gripping his tightly as Sarah wove her fictional narrative for a national audience. "She was my best friend for 13 years, Sarah told Mina Reynolds, eyes glistening with perfectly timed tears. "We shared everything. I trusted her completely. And then she became obsessed, I guess is the word, with my husband, with my career success, with the life I had built. And this obsession led to her attacking you publicly?" Mina asked, her expression practiced concern. Sarah nodded solemnly. "She accessed my private journal, distorted entries taken out of context, created this elaborate narrative about me betraying her, all to justify what she really wanted, which was to destroy my marriage and take my place in my husband's life." As she continued spinning her tale, adding new embellishments and outright fabrications, I felt a strange detachment. The person on screen wasn't the Sarah I had known for 13 years, or rather, she was exactly that person, just more visible now in her manipulation and deception. "She's good," David murmured as Sarah dabbed carefully at eyes that were emotional, but never quite tearful enough to smudge her makeup. "If I didn't know the truth, I might believe her." "That's always been her talent," I replied, making people believe her version of events. The difference is, now we have proof of what actually happened. The interview concluded with Sarah promoting her memoir and her new foundation supposedly dedicated to supporting victims of digital privacy violations and friendship betrayal, a transparent attempt to monetize her manufactured victimhood. As the program ended, my phone rang. "Paula, I'm guessing you saw the interview," she said without preamble. "Just finished watching." "She made a strategic error," Paula said, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "3 specific claims that directly contradict documented evidence we already possess. Plus, she's now alleged criminal behavior, computer hacking specifically, which escalates this beyond mere defamation. What does that mean for us?" It means our position with her publisher just strengthened considerably. I'm revising our letter to include these new false allegations and explicit reference to the evidence contradicting them. No responsible publisher will proceed with this book without significant legal protection from her, protection she can't provide if her claims are demonstrably false. After hanging up, I turned to David, feeling the first real hope since Sarah's campaign began. Paula thinks we might be able to stop the book. That would be something, he acknowledged. But even if we manage that, the blog remains. The interviews are out there. The narrative she's created is circulating. He was right, of course. Even if we succeeded in preventing the memoir's publication, Sarah had already spread her version widely. The question was whether our factual counter-evidence could effectively neutralize it. The answer came sooner than expected, and from an unexpected source. 2 days after Sarah's television appearance, I received an email from Evan Pierce, a journalist with the Metropolitan Observer, a respected online news platform known for in-depth investigative reporting. Ms. Mitchell. The email began formally. I've been following the public statements made by Sarah Harrison regarding your former friendship and the circumstances surrounding its dissolution. As part of due diligence for a potential article examining this situation, I would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and review any relevant documentation you believe provides context or correction to Ms. Harrison's account. My interest is in accuracy rather than sensationalism, and I am approaching all parties with the same request for substantiating evidence. I forwarded the email to Paula, who researched Evan Pierce and confirmed his reputation as a meticulous, ethical journalist with a history of balanced reporting on complex interpersonal disputes. This could be exactly what we need, she advised during our phone consultation. A thoughtful examination by a credible journalist who will actually verify claims rather than just repeating emotional narratives. I would provide him the documentation package we've assembled with the understanding that he'll independently verify everything. With Paula's guidance, I responded to Evan agreeing to share our evidence and make myself available for a limited interview focusing specifically on factual matters. After signing confidentiality agreements protecting sensitive personal information, we arranged to meet at Paula's office the following day. Evan Pierce turned out to be a thoughtful man in his early 40s, with the careful attention to detail one would expect from an investigative journalist. He reviewed our evidence methodically, asking clarifying questions and taking detailed notes. Just to be clear, he said at one point, you're not disputing that you accessed Ms. Harrison's journal and digital files without her knowledge or permission? I'm not, I confirmed. After discovering multiple instances where she had impersonated me electronically and manipulated situations to damage my relationship, I felt investigating the source was justified. I understand that raises ethical questions, which I'm happy to address, Evan nodded, making another note. And regarding the distribution of the information you found, you shared it selectively rather than posting publicly, correct? Yes. I provided specific information to specific individuals who needed to know: her husband regarding the affair and financial deception, her employers regarding workplace policy violations, mutual friends she had manipulated. I didn't post anything online or make any public statements. His questions continued for nearly 2 hours, probing not just what I had done but my reasoning and ethical considerations. Unlike Sarah's interviewers, who had accepted her emotional narrative without verification, Evan challenged every claim, requested documentation for every assertion, and approached the entire situation with rigorous skepticism. When we finished, he thanked me for my time and candor. I'll be speaking with others involved, including attempting to interview Ms. Harrison again with these specific questions in mind. My goal is to publish within 2 weeks, assuming all fact-checking is complete. After he left, Paula looked cautiously optimistic. He's thorough. That's good for us, since the facts support your position. But prepare yourself. Even balanced coverage will include some criticism of your methods. I can accept that, I replied. I've never claimed my approach was perfect, only that it was justified by the circumstances and based on genuine evidence rather than fabrication. True to his word, Evan spent the next 10 days conducting additional interviews and verifying documentation. He spoke with Jason, with Michael, with mutual friends who had witnessed Sarah's manipulations firsthand, and with independent experts in digital communication and privacy ethics. He also made multiple attempts to re-interview Sarah with specific questions about the contradictions between her public claims and the documented evidence. According to his subsequent email to me, she repeatedly rescheduled before finally declining through her literary agent, citing ongoing legal considerations. The resulting article, published on the Metropolitan Observer's website under the title "Truth, Lies, and the Gray Area Between Anatomy of a Friendship's Collapse," was as fair as could be expected, meticulously factual, carefully contextualizing both Sarah's claims and my countervailing evidence, and thoughtfully examining the ethical questions raised by both her original deception and my methods of exposing it. Crucially, it included the documented timeline of events, the verified evidence of Sarah's affair and financial deception, and direct quotes from Jason, Michael, and others contradicting specific aspects of Sarah's public narrative. While the article didn't portray me as a flawless hero, Evan raised legitimate questions about privacy boundaries and proportionality of response. It systematically dismantled Sarah's characterization of herself as an innocent victim targeted by a delusional, obsessive former friend. The response was immediate and far-reaching. Other media outlets picked up the story, focusing particularly on the contradictions between Sarah's emotional television appearance and the documented evidence. Her publisher issued a terse statement announcing the mutual decision to postpone her memoir project pending further development. Several of the platforms that had initially promoted her victim narrative published follow-up pieces reassessing the situation in light of the new information. And Sarah herself went completely silent, her blog unchanged but no longer updated, her social media accounts suddenly inactive, her public appearances canceled without explanation. It was, in many ways, a vindication more complete than I had dared hope for. Not because I had destroyed Sarah again, that had never been my goal this time, but because the truth had emerged despite her determined efforts to bury it beneath a compelling fictional narrative. 3 days after the article's publication, as the media storm began to subside, I received another unexpected email, this one from Sarah herself. "I know you probably won't believe anything I say at this point," she wrote, "but I need you to know that I'm getting help. Real help, not the performance I put on before. A therapist who doesn't let me hide behind victimhood or justifications. I understand now that what I did, both originally to you and David, and later with the blog and interviews, was deeply wrong. The memoir deal made me believe I could rewrite history, make myself the hero of my own story, but all I did was compound the original betrayal with new lies." The email continued, expressing remorse that seemed, for once, potentially genuine. There was no request for forgiveness or reconciliation, no expectation of response, just an acknowledgement of responsibility and a commitment to change. I read it several times, trying to determine whether this represented another manipulation or genuine growth. In the end, I decided it didn't matter. Whether Sarah was truly changing or simply adjusting her tactics, my path remained the same. Forward, focused on my own life and relationships, vigilant but not vengeful. I didn't respond to her email. Some bridges once burned cannot and should not be rebuilt, but I did forward it to Jason, knowing he was still dealing with the aftermath of their divorce and might find some closure in her acknowledgement of responsibility. As for me, the conclusion of this second chapter with Sarah brought an unexpected sense of completion. When I had originally exposed her betrayal, there had been a certain satisfaction, but also lingering uncertainty, questions about whether I had gone too far, whether the methods had tainted the justice of the outcome. This time, facing her public attack, I had responded with restraint, with factual precision rather than emotional escalation. And the result had been more definitive, more clearly righteous than the first confrontation. Perhaps that was the final lesson in this long, painful saga, that truth, presented clearly and without embellishment, is ultimately more powerful than even the most emotionally compelling fiction. "So it's really over?" David asked that evening as we walked Cooper along the riverfront, the city lights reflecting in the dark water. I considered the question carefully. "With Sarah? I think so. She's lost too much. Credibility, publisher, public platform. There's nothing left for her to try, no angle left to play." "And with us?" he asked, his voice softer, more hesitant. "Are we okay?" I stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "More than okay. Everything Sarah did, first to break us apart, then to rewrite history, ultimately failed. We're stronger now than we would have been without those challenges." He smiled, the tension in his face easing. That's the strange silver lining in all this, isn't it? We know exactly what we're capable of weathering together. Exactly. I reached up, touching his face gently. Most couples never get tested like this. We have proof of what we can survive. As we continued our walk, Cooper trotting happily ahead of us, I realized something fundamental had shifted within me. The hypervigilance, the lingering anger, the occasional 3 a.m. doubts, they had receded, replaced by a quiet confidence. Sarah had tried twice to destroy what mattered to me, first my relationship, then my reputation. Both times she had failed, not because I had outmaneuvered her, though perhaps I had, but because reality is ultimately more resilient than fiction, truth more sustainable than deception. There would be other challenges ahead, of course. Life guarantees that much. But having weathered this particular storm, having faced betrayal, enacted consequences, defended against retaliation, and emerged intact, I felt prepared for whatever might come next. Not because I had become harder or more cynical, but because I had become clearer about who I was, what I valued, who I could trust, and what I would protect. Sarah had tried to destroy me and failed. In the process, she had inadvertently helped me become stronger, more resilient, more certain of my own boundaries and values. It wasn't the outcome she had intended, but it was the one she had created nonetheless. And in that irony, perhaps, lay the perfect conclusion to our story. Epilogue. 2 years later, the evening light slanted golden through the windows of our new house, a charming craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood, purchased 6 months after David proposed. Cooper dozed in a patch of sunlight while I arranged fresh flowers in a vase, the diamond on my left hand catching the light with each movement. "Mail's here," David called from the front door. "Mostly junk, but there's something that looks like an invitation." He handed me a thick cream envelope addressed to both of us in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a wedding invitation. Jason Harrison and Rebecca Chen requested the pleasure of our company at their upcoming nuptials. "Jason's getting married," I said, smiling genuinely. After his divorce from Sarah had finalized, Jason had taken time to recover before eventually meeting Rebecca through work. The few times we'd socialized with them, Rebecca had impressed me with her warmth and straightforward nature, qualities that seemed to help Jason heal from the manipulation he had endured in his first marriage. "We should go," David said, peering over my shoulder at the invitation. "If you're comfortable with it, it feels, I don't know, full circle somehow." I nodded slowly. "It does. And yes, we should go. I'd like to see him happy starting fresh." As I added the wedding date to our calendar, I reflected on how much had changed since the tumultuous days of Sarah's betrayal and subsequent campaign against me. The events that had once dominated my thoughts now felt distant, processed, integrated into my life's narrative without defining it. In the aftermath of the Metropolitan Observer article, Sarah had indeed maintained her silence. Her social media accounts eventually disappeared completely, and through mutual acquaintances, I heard she had moved to Seattle for a fresh start. Her memoir never materialized, though occasionally I would search her name online, finding only traces of her previous life, old professional profiles, archived articles mentioning projects she had worked on. It seemed she had finally accepted that some stories cannot be rewritten, some consequences cannot be avoided through narrative manipulation. Whether this represented genuine growth or simply pragmatic adaptation to reality, I couldn't know. And increasingly I found I didn't need to know. My own life had expanded beyond the shadow of that conflict. My relationship with David had deepened and solidified, leading naturally to engagement and now our shared home. My career had advanced, partly due to the focused determination I had developed during the challenges with Sarah. New friendships had formed, healthier and more transparent than what I had experienced before. The hard lessons about trust, about the capacity for betrayal in those closest to us, about the importance of evidence over emotion when making critical judgments, had been integrated rather than rejected. They had made me more discerning but not more cynical, more careful but not less open to genuine connection. "What are you thinking about?" David asked, noticing my contemplative mood as I finished with the flowers. "The past, the future. How differently things might have turned out if Sarah hadn't tried to come between us." He came beside me, wrapping an arm around my waist. "Regrets?" "No," I said truthfully. "Perspective." If she hadn't done what she did, we might have had an easier path, but we wouldn't have had the opportunity to prove, to ourselves and each other, exactly what we're made of, what we can withstand together. David nodded thoughtfully. I've thought the same thing. As painful as it was, that experience revealed things about both of us that might have taken years to discover otherwise. Your determination, my capacity for trust even after betrayal, our shared commitment to truth above comfort. I leaned into him, grateful for his understanding. It's strange to feel almost thankful for something that caused so much pain. Not strange, he corrected gently. Human. Complex. Real. Like all the most important things in life. As the setting sun cast long shadows across our living room, Cooper stirred from his nap and padded over, nudging his head against our legs for attention. David scratched behind the dog's ears, and I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. This was the life I had fought for, not perfect, not without challenges or complications, but authentic, built on truth rather than convenient fictions, strengthened by difficulties rather than weakened by them. Sarah had once been central to my understanding of friendship, of trust, of betrayal. Now she was simply a chapter in a much longer, richer story, a difficult passage that had ultimately led to greater wisdom and deeper connections. The invitation to Jason's wedding sat on our counter, a tangible reminder that life continues, that healing is possible, that new beginnings emerge from endings both peaceful and painful. Tomorrow I would RSVP for both of us. We would witness Jason's new beginning, celebrate his happiness, and quietly acknowledge our own journey from betrayal to restoration. Not everyone gets a second chance at happiness after profound betrayal. Not everyone finds the strength to fight for truth when fiction would be easier. Not everyone emerges from manipulation with greater wisdom rather than greater bitterness. But we had. And in that outcome, so different from what Sarah had intended when she first began her campaign against our relationship, lay the most complete victory imaginable. Not revenge, not destruction, but flourishing despite all attempts to prevent it. In the end, that was the truest justice of all.